I sometimes am at a loss to decide which technique to use during an interview. I'm quite good with a hatchet, not bad with a hammer. Occasionally I can use a scalpel, but when I meet Canada's most famous novelist, I don't know which way to turn. So because you're laughing and smiling, I'm taking a quote out of that bald-headed old stinker, Peter C. Newman. Remember him? Runs a paper in the East. Becoming a metaphor is never easy. Look into that camera. And Margaret Atwood, with her wintry eyes and corrugated hair. You don't have wintry eyes. Or do you?
Well, I suppose it depends on who I'm looking at.
Give me your wintry eyes look. No, that's soulful. That's not wintry. That's kind of...
We're in Vancouver. It's not snowing.
And your hair is not corrugated, is it?
I think of it as naturally curly myself. I used to try to straighten it, but you see, Peter's jealous.
He sure as heck is. He's a bald, funny little man with round shoulders. And,
oh, but that's a nice piece now, you have to admit.
I suppose it's a nice piece. He says, Atwood is to Canadian literature, notes Roy McGregor, as Gordon Lightfoot is to Canadian music. More institution than individual. I don't like that. Do you?
You don't like meeting an institution?
No, I don't. I like meeting individuals. Do you regard yourself as an institution?
I don't, but I don't make that stuff up.
When was the first building block produced in the institution of Atwood in terms of novels?
Well, in terms of novels, I was living here in 1964 or 5, and not only did I write my first published novel here, but I also wrote my first published book of poetry here. So you can see Vancouver is very good for writers.
We've never met before.
No, I was very unknown then when I lived here.
No, but even since you have been known, you don't normally go on the book flogging circuit, do you?
I haven't done it since 1972, and the reason for that was, for my last two books with this publisher, 1976 and 77, I had just had a baby. And you don't take a young baby like that on tours like this.
You were very lucky last year, weren't you?
What happened? Oh yes, I went to Scotland. Yes,
you
that was very nice.
What did you do in Scotland?
Well, it was an excellent place for writing. I finished this book. That took me till about January.
Weather was so bad you couldn't go out the house.
You're right. Not only that, every time it snowed, and it snowed about 8 times, everything shut down. And what they call the gritters all went on strike because they'd been waiting for years to do this. The gritters are the men who put grit on when it snows. And the airports all closed down, and a train tunnel collapsed, so you couldn't get to London by train. So we were just in Edinburgh for all that period.
And it's a very snooty, cold place, Edinburgh. I mean,
We
the people
didn't
are
find
chilly
it.
too, aren't they?
Well, we weren't moving in the chilly circles. We knew some writers and things like that, and of course we were guests, and
That's
we
right.
found that myth of stingy Scotchmen just doesn't apply.
Doesn't apply in Glasgow.
No.
It doesn't apply in Edinburgh.
Well, no, they were very good. I mean, I think Graham was there for about a month before he ever bought a drink for himself. Everybody bought them for
Well,
him.
they're certainly not slow in producing a drink in Scotland. It's one of the national characteristics. You know, it's quite incredible. Your first book was in '64.
I wrote it in '64.
Published in...
It wasn't published till '69 because Jack McClellan lost the manuscript for 2 years.
He would, wouldn't he? You mean he got it?
He hasn't done it since. He got it.
Approved it?
He approved it.
And lost it?
Well, and I was so young that I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to be hearing back right away. I thought it ordinarily took that long. And so I started finally writing them letters saying, where is it? And I didn't get any answers because they were too embarrassed. They were madly searching for it. And then I got an award for a book of poetry, and Jack McClellan read a piece on me that said I had an unpublished novel. And he wrote me a letter saying, let's see your unpublished novel. And he'd had it for 2 years.
You said you've got it. He
Yes.
found it, he published it. I tend to be kind of crass. I'm not going to ask you about money. You know, I'm not that crass, not with you, because I'm basically, you know, an elderly, somewhat sophisticated old gentleman who likes to be nice to ladies. I know that attitude will probably infuriate you.
I like people who are nice to me. Why not?
Well, I thought it was supposed to be sexist. If you're pleasant to women, you're supposed to be sexist and demeaning.
No, the thing is to be pleasant to everybody. If you're just pleasant to women and unpleasant to men, I suppose that would be sexist.
Or pleasant to some women and unpleasant to others.
Oh no, that's individualistic.
That's allowed.
Yes.
You're allowed to be nasty, aren't you?
Well, you are.
Oh, you too. You can be pretty sharp in your books, can't you?
In my books, yes.
You're bad-tempered.
No, not bad-tempered. That is, it takes a long time to make
smolder.
me angry. Yeah, that's right.
You smoke
yeah.
and you sulk.
No, I sometimes become irritable towards the end of a day.
Well, I was going to ask you anyway. I hope you have outsold that other tall, balding Canadian institution, Burton. Have you outsold them in the numbers game?
I don't think so. No, he writes non-fiction and I write fiction. And
You've what? You're up to 600,000.
That's everything, though. That's paperbacks, poetry.
Let's
the
count
works.
everything. Can't you beat Burton?
How much has he sold?
I don't know, but the next time he comes, I'm going to tell him as a fact that Margaret Atwood told me that she had outsold
Don't
him.
you do that. My name will be mud if you do that.
One's got to keep in with Pierre and McClellan and the Eastern Media Mafia, because if
They're
they
taller
snub
than
you,
I am.
yeah, you're dead if they snub you. Look, I think what I should do this morning is let people talk to Margaret Atwood, because we've already had people running up to me and saying, "Why didn't you tell me Margaret Atwood was on? My wife wanted the book autographed." You going to autograph books?
Sure.
Because it's you, I might even tell people where you're going to autograph.
I don't know. I know that I'm doing something at Woodward's.
That's
but
okay by me.
They're about to tell me when.
We'll get it
When,
during the
when.
break. Hang on. Your calls to the Margaret Atwood, who does not have wintry eyes and does not have corrugated hair and is, how old are you?
39.
Don't look at me. After the break. Margaret Atwood, household name? No, you're not an institution. Tell me, importantly, or tell me a serious question. How important would the likes of the Canada Council and grants in your early initial stages be to set you on your feet as an outstanding person in Canadian literature? How much of a help was it?
I didn't have it. I had an academic grant because I was a graduate student. So I had a grant to help me study Victorian literature. Before that, I had a Woodrow Wilson Fellowship. That's before the Canada Council. So I had those. And not until I was already established did I get my single and only, one and only Canada Council grant, which was not a junior grant, but a senior one. And I'm not eligible for those anymore because I make too much money. They deduct your income from the grant, and it would be zero in my case. So that's as it should be. There's no reason why they should give me money. I make enough of my own.
I'm a professional redneck on the subject, and there's one author from British Columbia who absolutely infuriates me. I'll do him the grace of not plugging his books, who got a grant, $5,000, and the book went whammo, you know. It's a formula book. It was a formula book. And I said to him on the air, this was on radio, "Oh, you got $5,000 from Canada Council. You're making so much money, I presume, dear friend, you're going to give it back." He said, "No." Who was right, he or me?
Well, I think when you start making money, you give it back in the form of taxes. That's how they get it out of you. But you have to pay, it used to be that when you got a grant, you didn't have to pay taxes on it, but now you do. So that any grant money that you get is counted as income, so automatically you can deduct whatever taxes the person is paying.
Well, that's a logical step. That's a step in the right direction. But you would approve of Canada Council grant to young, or grants anyway, from public funds to young, struggling literateurs, otherwise you'd have no such being. Is that right?
Well, I think once upon a time it was very necessary. Once upon a time they put money into writers, you know, just to establish writing as a serious thing to do, because when I grew up, nobody even thought of writing as even an occupation or something that anybody should take seriously at all. So I think at least it gave it a kind of legitimacy. When I was growing up and I said I wanted to be a writer, people said, "What?"
Yeah.
I said, "What? What do you mean, a writer?" Because there weren't any visible ones.
In the medieval days, in olden days, I suppose you had to get a patron, didn't you? Is that what you called them?
Long ago, I think many hundreds of years ago, they had patrons for the arts, certainly, and there aren't too many of those around today.
No, and the public temper
So
was...
I think at one time it was useful, but now if I were the government, I would be putting it into studies of book selling. I would be putting it into the selling end, because if the selling end is taking care of itself, then the writing end, you'll be able to get those writers published.
Mind you, there has been a great increase in activity in Canadian publishing and Canadian buying of Canadian books by Canadians.
Well over 1,000%.
It's amazing.
Huge.
Go ahead to Margaret Atwood.
Morning, Mr. Atwood.
Good morning.
This camera here, Margaret.
That one.
That one.
Know if you, I'd like to know if you see Canada as finally achieving a separate Canadian literary identity, as opposed to the States, which for so many years we have been the same thing.
I think it's actually had a separate literary identity for a long time, but for a long time it wasn't recognized because people thought the adjective Canadian meant second rate, and they just weren't reading Canadian books. And I think that those days have long gone, but I think that identity has been there anyway since the 20s and 30s. In fact, I did write a book on the subject. It's called Survival.
Maybe, but what about the rest of the world? Like, do they see Canada as having a separate identity?
Very much so. In fact, I was in Germany this past year. I had a book coming out there in translation, and I was talking about, you know, the colonial mentality and all that stuff, and they said, we don't know what you're talking about. We've always seen Canada as a separate country.
That's very nice.
Partly because of the war too, I suppose, where the Canadians were so clearly identified as a separate force.
Yes, they were wild men. They were known quite distinctly.
As you can see in bookstores now, there are separate Canadian sections.
There have always been those Canadiana sections.
2 or 3 books usually that no one ever really bothered buying because
On
it
the
was
other
Canadian.
hand, once upon a time they would put everything Canadian in the Canadiana section along with the cookbooks and the books on maple leaves. And now, if you write a novel, they put you in with the real novels, which is a step ahead.
Thank you very much, old chap.
Thank you.
Are you a writer?
Practice.
Practice. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Margaret, and welcome to Vancouver. I wish the weather was better. I saw you about 7 years or 8 years ago at UBC, and ever since then you've been my ideal, and I enjoy all your books, and I hope you have more every year.
Thank you very much.
Why is she your ideal?
Because I'm a Canadian woman, a young woman, and her books, The Edible Woman, and all the rest of them, they just speak so much to me, much more than so many other books and I've read. I'm quite a reader. I really enjoy her. And she just seemed to me when I was going through university, she was just my ideal, just sort of she spoke to me, I guess.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Where from? Kelowna. Kelowna?
Hello.
Reading Kelowna?
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yes. This is Betty Burton from Kelowna calling. Hello, this is Betty Burton from Kelowna calling.
Yeah, I can hear you, Ma.
Miss Atwood, I see a great resemblance in the Webster end of the family that we are connected with.
That's right.
Webster was my husband's grandfather, and I...
What did she say?
My grandmother's maiden name was Webster.
A fine woman.
belonged to the Webster Dictionary.
That's right, Noah Webster, Webster
Yes.
Dictionary.
Wealthy, too.
No, that was a long time ago. I don't think he made that much money out of
Your
it.
grandmother's maiden name was, what was her first name?
Webster. Her first name was Ora.
Ora. Mm-hmm. Oh, funny
But these
name.
were Websters that went to New England a
Yeah.
long time ago.
No relation to that. We're peasants. You're intellectuals. That's a different, that's a fact.
I've got
Peasant.
some peasants too.
No, you're an intellectual. And what are you, Burton from Kelowna?
My husband's mother was Eugenie Webster.
Big Jeannie.
Eugenie.
Yes.
Eugenia.
Contact with Joyce.
And anyhow, we're very happy you've made your familial acquaintance, and you say she looks like one of your Websters.
Oh, she looks like all of the girls.
Does she? Do you know this woman, Burton?
Sure, I know who she is, and I'll tell my mother when I go back.
Oh,
that I
well,
was
thank
talking
you
to
so
her.
much, Margaret.
Thank
And
you.
tell your mother, too, you were also talking to a real Webster. Thanks, love. Hope, BC.
Hello.
Hello.
Margaret Atwood, I would like to say first that I feel very honored to be speaking to you almost personally. And I have a rather weird problem. Maybe you can help me with it. I've been writing on and off for years. And in 1961, I had a story published in Prism International. And it was, I have to say, a good story. It was, the best I've ever written. But ever since then, I've never been able to capture this same kind of writing. I do get rejection slips, and the usual comment is, your story is good, but not inspired, which I know. That certain flow of language that I was able to produce in this one story. I've never been able to produce this flow.
You want the secret of producing inspiration, is that right?
It's something like that. I am now...
Otherwise, you're going to go on forever.
No, I'll finish. I'm writing quite a lot now, and in case you should say, well, are you writing enough? I'm writing a lot. My family has grown up. Do you have any kind of mental block like this, and if so, what do you do about it?
I never have, but a lot of other people have had, and I could see the possibility of doing it. But what I would recommend is try to remember how you wrote the first one, what the conditions were that you did it under.
Yes, I have tried that,
and you can't remember.
You see, big difference between you and a formula writer like Pierre, with these researchers who bring in huge stacks of typed stuff, and he says, yes, 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 yes. Is that he gets up in the morning, you know, and goes for his jog, swims in the pool, and then sits down and writes exactly 896 words for the day, then leaves it till tomorrow morning. Is that what you do?
I don't get up in the morning, go for a swim, and go for a jog, that's for sure.
And you write full out for a long period? Or?
No, I can't anymore. I have a child, and that, of course, cuts down the amount of time per day you can spend writing. But I set aside 1 o'clock to maybe 5 or 6, and that's what I have to do the writing in. I have to condense what used to be 10 hours down into 5 hours. And for poetry, I don't have any schedule at all. It doesn't work. For prose, you have to have that time, but there's no telling whether you're ever going to write anything in those hours.
Yeah, yeah.
But usually I'm so desperate that I do.
You finally say, I've got to get started.
I've got to get started.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, hello?
Hello.
Jack?
Yes.
I wanted to tell you, I think your attitude toward women is very charming.
Thank you.
I want to ask...
She's never heard that before.
Yeah, but I wanted to ask Margaret where she was born.
I was actually born in Ottawa, but I left it 6 months later in a pack sack, as a matter of fact. I was taken up to the Northwoods of Quebec. But my parents are from the Maritimes, and both of those names, my father's name is Atwood, of course. My mother's name was Killam. They're both Maritimes names, and that's where most of my relatives live. So the fact that I was born in Ottawa, don't hold it against me.
Killam.
And you were raised there?
Do I what, sorry?
You were
No, I
raised-
wasn't raised in Ottawa. I was raised in about 80 miles north of Temiskaming. No, sorry, 80 miles north of North Bay, near Temiskaming.
Okie dokie, thank you very much. Let's have some more calls from Atwood fans, please. Don't let me down, you stinkers.
They're not all fans.
Not one. You wouldn't get a nasty call if you stayed here 100 years.
Oh, I don't know.
Unless
I
we
know, I
get
guess
on to
I'm
something
masterminded.
horrible. You're not a great... Yes, I suppose you're a great advocate for... Is there still women's lib, or is it... Oh, it's everything
There's
okay
still
now?
women's
Is
lib.
it? You don't hear much about it, do you?
I was at a dinner last night honoring the Persons case, which was the case that established women as persons, according to law, in Calgary, and there were 900 women at it. Not only that, there was a waiting list of about 300. Really astonishing.
You're going to have to fill me in. I've never heard of the Persons case.
Well, once upon a time, women were not legally persons. That means they could not vote, they could not be judges, for instance, they could not be appointed to the Senate, any of those things. And what the law said was that women were persons from the point of view of pains and penalties. That is, they could be arrested and put in jail and all that. But they were not persons from the point of view of rights and privileges. In other words, they only got the bad part of being a person. And 5 Alberta women, among them Nellie McClung,
Oh, yeah, Nellie,
who's been
baby.
on a stamp,
That's right.
took it to the Supreme Court, the Canadian Supreme Court, which said that women were not persons. Then they took it to the English Privy Council, which said that women were persons. And yesterday was the 50th anniversary of that event.
1919, 1929.
Yes.
As recently as
As recently as
1929.
that, we've been persons for 50 years.
And only due to the courtesy of the
Of
Privy
England,
Council.
yes, yes.
The Englishman, not the Canadian Supreme Court.
No, they said no.
How many Supreme Court judges are there women right now in the Supreme Court of Canada? Nil.
None. Yes, there are some senators, though. I think
Oh, but that's
maybe
a political hack job. Anybody can get that job, but that's of no consequence in
once
this
upon a
country.
time, not anybody could get that job.
I mean, the right shade of political hack gets the job. So that's not something surely women of intellect, maturity, and decency will strive for.
Women are not angels. They're not above political hackdom, as I'm sure we all know.
In other words, the women have got to get their fair share of political payola and hackery as well as the men.
Well, if you're going to be a person, that's what you let yourself in for.
Yeah, but you get treated a lot lighter than the criminal justice system, I'll tell you. Don't you?
You get treated better?
Yeah, if you're a woman.
Yeah. Well, of course, there aren't as many women criminals.
You mean there
Mostly
aren't as
they,
many caught?
Well, I also think there aren't as many. They don't turn to sort of violence with guns and sort of beating people up and stuff like that. I think they take to drinking in private.
Yeah,
and
a lot of drugs.
And
I want to
mental
ask you.
institutions.
I want to ask you a serious question too about something else after the break. Take it away, Freddie. Pornography and prostitution. Deadly serious, Margaret, as you as an observer of a Canadian woman. We have the most sickening attitudes in this country where people think prostitution is perfectly all right, even for judges. But forget the judges. Think about the women. How would you tackle? What do you think of this? Should we accept it as normal and necessary? And I see somebody just the other day was talking about legalizing it in Canada.
Well, of course, I don't approve of prostitution. I don't like pornography any more than anybody else does. The way the prostitution laws are set up now, it seems to me that it's the women, it's the sellers, if you like, who get hit, and the buyers are pretty much scot-free.
True.
So you've got to equalize it one way or another. You've either got to say, okay, neither party, right? Or else you've got to say both parties.
Maybe it shouldn't be an offense at all, but then, you know, you get the people who have a fairly rigid standard of morals saying, I don't want my daughter growing up to be a hooker on the streets of Vancouver.
Well, I wouldn't want anybody growing up to be a hooker on the streets of Vancouver. I think that if you change the total attitude towards women, that women would not be seen as Kleenex, that is, disposable commodities, and then there wouldn't be any buyers, and then there wouldn't be any sellers. But you know that selling situation is created by buyers. In other words, if there are buyers who want something, there's always going to be somebody who's going to supply it, no matter what it is, if it's bubble gum or gold or whatever it is. There's always going to be a supplier. So I would say work on the buyers and not on the sellers. If you can turn around the heads of the buyers, then you won't have any prostitution.
Same goes with the pornography in a way, I suppose, but I think pornography and the magazines sold openly on the stands today, while we must have freedom and all the rest of that stuff, they do more to demean women.
Women and children.
Oh,
I
the
would
children
say.
one. I'd hang the people who use the children in these books.
Well, Civil Liberties, to which I belong, has fairly has thought about this, and as far as the child ones say, they say that photographs of children used for pornography should be illegal, because merely the taking of those photographs is exploitation of children. If they want to do drawings, help yourself, but not photos. And also the way in which it is sold ought to be controlled. That is, young children on the streets and innocent bystanders, if you like, should not be exposed to this stuff. If people are that desperate for it, they can go into a store. It doesn't have to be out on the street where other people have to see it.
I agree with that much. Go ahead, please.
Hello, good morning, Mr. Webster.
Morning.
I'd just like to ask Mrs. Atwood if she is ever considered doing any work in the academic field as lecturing on her materials. I'm a UBC student, and I'm a little bit tired of listening to UBC professors discuss her work when I'd much rather hear it from her.
Well, I used to be a university professor. In fact, my first academic job was at UBC. But I was so young and low on the totem pole that what I taught was grammar at 8 in the morning, I might add.
Well, we hate taking it just as much as you hate teaching it.
Well, everybody was asleep, so it didn't really matter. But I would prefer not to lecture on my own work. I think that's the job of critics. I'm a trained Victorianist, and I'm quite happy to lecture on Charles Dickens and George Eliot. That's what I know something about. I would rather not examine my own work in detail because I'm still writing. Maybe when I stop, I will then turn my mind to what I have written, but right now I don't want to stop the process.
Other university ever approached you for any type of guest lecturing?
Yeah, I get offers all the time, but I'm a writer, and right now I'm supporting myself with my writing, and since I'm a writer, that's what I really prefer to do.
Thank you. Good call, that one. Go ahead, please.
Margaret, I've just finished reading your book, Surfacing, and what part of Canada were you writing about in the book?
I was writing about a very specific part of Canada, namely the area where I grew up, about 80 miles north of North Bay on the Quebec side of the border.
And you often mention during the book about your dislike for Americans. Is this...
Well, that's social commentary. I don't put conversations in my books that I haven't heard in real life. Don't confuse the author with the characters, and take a good hard look at that scene in which she thinks they're Americans and they turn out to be Canadians. I think you can dislike a country's foreign policy without pinning it on every single individual in that country. You know, you have to take these things in the context of the book.
I was a little confused with the ending. Find her father?
Oh, yeah, sure. They dug him up. They dredged him up. He was the corpse.
Go ahead, please.
I was just wondering if you had any movie plans for Lady Oracle.
As a matter of fact, Margot Kidder, who plays Lois Lane in Superman, has an option on that book, and she wishes to develop it as a vehicle for herself. That is, she wants to play the central role. And she's now at the first draft screenplay stage, and she has a writer who works for Lily Tomlin, so I think she's going in the right direction.
Thank you. Good stuff. Oh, tonight, 7:30, Maggie Atwood will be in Port Royal Woodwards. Tomorrow, Saturday, 11:30, Woodwards Oak Ridge. And Victoria, Saturday afternoon in Woodwards. And tomorrow night, reading in a literary storefront in Gastown at 8 o'clock. And in Victoria on Sunday at 8 o'clock, the Open Space Gallery for reading and autographing. I should have got you to read some poetry, but I forgot. How are we doing for time, Freddie? My thanks to Margaret Atwood, a gracious, pleasant, evocative, literate intellectual, such as seldom seen on this rather lowbrow program. Thank you, Margaret Atwood. I'll be back after these messages.